Hello there and welcome to this vlog of July 2022. A little bit of housekeeping first because you may have realised that I haven't done a video in a couple of weeks. The first week of my little mini sabbatical was planned because I was travelling with work and basically having a bit of a jolly while I was doing that. Second week was very much unplanned though because I did catch COVID and I was really quite ill. I'm kind of all right now. I can speak again, which is good. But yeah, it hit me pretty hard. I won't lie. I was pretty worried for a couple of days there, but the old immune system has kicked in, and I am back again. But yeah, I think I might look a little bit paler than usual, and yeah, my throat is still a little bit hoarse. So apologies for that if that's coming through the mic there. Anyway, let's get into this because I obviously haven't done much planning for today's video, given that I'm just relatively recently back into the seat, so to speak. And I did plan to do a lore video today, but instead I thought, I'm just going to do something a little bit light, something that I can do like really quickly and that I think will probably like resonate because I know people do love lists. I love a list as well, so I was like, oh, okay, I'll just do an episode on like the top 5 mechs of 3025. It's a bit of a weird topic, this, I suppose, but I was thinking about it because when I was ill, well, when I was kind of not so ill I couldn't really do much, but when I got over the temperature, I was planning some games that I wanted to play over the next few months, and I've got some like introduction games set up. And if you're doing an introduction game in BattleTech, as everybody knows, you always start in 3025. And I was doing some like force building around that, where I'm trying to get like new gamers who are maybe they've probably played tabletop before, but they've never played BattleTech before. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try and create some like some forces that work quite well against each other. So I'll probably take a force that's maybe like say more ballistics based, because it's obviously harder to use ballistics in 3025 because of all the crazy ammo explosions, and I'll give them something a little bit kinder, like energy based mechs. And as I've been like creating these lists, I've kind of been thinking, there's such a discrepancy between mechs of that era. There are some genuinely amazing mechs in 3025 that actually stand up in the clan invasion. We'll talk about one of those specifically on this list. But it just got me into that mindset of thinking about how certain mechs of that era are still incredibly good, even though they are effectively like Succession Wars, post the Star League era, so they're made up from the very like rudimentary technologies that came after the Star League, because obviously they lost a lot of that scientific innovation. So you kind of lose things like the double heat sinks and like the extended range weaponry and things like that. But it's just interesting to see there are just some standout mechs in that 3025 era, and those are the ones that we're going to discuss today. More specifically, my top 5 list for that. I'm going to be as objective as possible, and as I always do with these lists, I'm going to set down some ground rules, which you can see here in front of you. So let's just talk through these and then we'll get right into the list. So the first thing, most importantly, the mech that I'll be speaking about here in turn must be available in at least one major inner sphere faction in 3025, and that's MUL approved. So that's anything that's listed on the master unit list. That's quite an ambiguous thing because you do get certain powers that do have access to kind of like the old Star League mechs. So for instance, like the Draconis Combine do occasionally have like a cache of mechs that they've been given by by somebody at Comstar, presumably in payment for something. So you do often find, for instance, a good example is like the Lancelot, which is an amazing mech, and there is like a Succession Wars like more junky Lancelot, but it wouldn't be a stretch to say that someone in the Draconis Combine did have like an old Star League version of the Lancelot. In this case, though, the Star League version of the Lancelot can't be on this list because it's kind of, it won't be on the the MUL approved list. You will get a Lancelot on there, but it will be kind of the Succession Wars Junker variant of it. So yeah, it's there's some ambiguity to it, and I've kind of put my own stamp on it. But again, I've checked the list, and I've just made sure that everything that I'm going to list here is on at least one of those faction power lists. Second one, which is a little bit contentious, but I just put must not have a design date beyond 3025. There's one very specific reason I've done that, because of the Banshee with the 2 PPCs and the AC-10. Is that the 5S? I think it's the 3S. The 3S is like the Succession Wars Junker variant of the Banshee, the one that's just very fast but has very minimal weaponry. The 5S is the crazy variant, which is just super overpowered. That would absolutely be on this list if we were doing just kind of an era and we were just saying, okay, it's Renaissance era. So that would kind of run up until like, the it's difficult where you could probably say it actually stops at the end of the beginning of the clan invasion. But that would be too far, because 3025 is that magical place where, yes, they are designing new mechs. Yes, they're doing these new like variants, like the Banshee that I've just talked about. But 3025 is kind of really core, like before that like explosion in Renaissance kicks off, and that's what we're dealing with specifically here. So as soon as you go above and beyond 3025, this list starts to break down, because you start getting like really amazing mechs coming through. Not necessarily with all the lost tech on there, but you do get like hints of that coming through. So you do start getting like variants of mechs with like double heat sinks, and even like you get things like the Hatchet Man, which actually could be on this list. I think that's a 3023 mech off the top of my head, I think, or like the Raven and the Cataphract, they're both 3025. They actually don't have the lost tech on there, so they would be eligible for these lists. But as you get into the 3030s and 3040s, it's much easier to justify putting double heat sinks on mechs because it's more common. So I don't want to veer too far beyond, well, at all above 3025, because I think it just skewers this list quite badly. Points 3 and 4 there are interrelated, so no lost tech mechs. I've already specified that really, and no lost tech equipment. So even if a mech, if it had like a random, like, I'm trying to think of like a Beagle probe or something like that from like the Star League, that wouldn't be on this list, couldn't be on there. Again, the Raven does come around at this time, and they do kind of reinvent that technology, but it's so difficult to phrase this. It's an early version of an old technology, so it's not as good as like the old like electronic warfare equipment from back in the Star League era, but they've kind of reimagined it and re-engineered it. And the fifth point there is just standard variant mechs only, so obviously no custom mechs. I'm keeping everything, I think, to like the vanilla variant. So it's, if you look these mechs up on Sana, that will be the list that you get, or the description that you get for that variant. I'm not using specific variants. I could have done that for sure. Like that wouldn't have been a problem. If a variant of a specific mech gets made in, like the, 2848, something like that, completely justifiable to be on this list. But just for the sake of like ease, I've just kept it all to those like really well-known variants of the mechs that exist. So let's get into this then. List of 5. We're going to be using Flex, obviously, because you know how much I love Flex. So let's go right into the first one here. And this will probably be a mech that surprises a few people. The 8Q Awesome. Now, it will surprise a few people for 2 very different reasons. One, that it's even on this list, because I did make a video a few months ago. Not so much bad-mouthing the Awesome, but I've done the video, I've made some clickbaity titles that said something like, why the Victor is so much better than the Awesome, or something like that. And it was the one video I've done where I've kind of just got like a modicum of heat, because the Awesome's a very, very popular mech, as it should, because it's a fantastic mech. But I'd done that video for a very specific reason, and that was just to say that you've got to be careful with the Awesome, because if you don't know what you're doing with it, or you don't know how kind of the minimum range penalty stuff can really go against you, you can get, like, even though it looks like prima facie like a very impressive mech, it does have limitations if you don't know what you're doing with it. But that's not to say that as a mech of its own volition or within a lance, it's a ridiculously powerful mech. The other reason why some people might be surprised is that it's not actually higher on this list, because it really is a beast of a mech. And I'm going to explain that as well, because I think by all rights it probably is, within a lance, it probably is the most effective mech on this list. But I consider this mech a little bit of a cheat, because if you look at the actual year of production here, it's 2665, which is like right splat in the middle of the Star League. So the Awesome is a Star League mech. So I hear you say, well, why are they so prevalent in 3025? Good question. That's because the Awesome is a very, very cheap machine and was just retrofitted with all the old equipment that's still absolutely available in the Succession Wars era and in 3025, which was presumably why they were just able to keep banging them off the the factory floor, because you can see it's single heat sinks. So even though it's got 28 of them, it's still single heat sinks. Regular old PPCs. There are no extended range PPCs on there. It's like the ultimate no frills mech is the Awesome, and that's why it's popular. It doesn't do anything brilliantly, but it does everything very well. So damage output, very well. Very good, sorry. Its movement, I mean, it's an 80-ton mech. It's a 3.5, so it's not exactly, tearing up any highways. But for an 80-ton mech with that weaponry, 3.5's completely acceptable. It's got completely solid armor, actually really quite good armor. It's got no weaknesses. It's just it's a walking tank with 3 big turrets, 3 PPCs. Obviously, it has the regular little S laser on there as well, but hey ho, I mean, I don't think you're really going to be using that very often. It's the 3 PPCs that you care about. Little design features as well in the Awesome, which just make it really, really powerful, like the 2 PPCs on the center torsos. That makes a massive difference, because you get that right arm shot off much easier than you will do the side torsos, which means that you can afford to kind of lose that one of those PPCs and it not have a major output on your damage criteria, because you've still got those 2 that you are firing with. It's another thing as well with that many single heat sinks. Those heat sinks obviously peppered throughout the structure, so when you're taking crits, you've just got such a high chance of just having one old heat sink knocked out, as opposed to anything more traumatic, like an engine or a gyro hit, or God forbid, like a cockpit hit or a sensor hit or something like that. So it's one of those mechs that it's walking efficiency, and in 3025, walking efficiency is absolute king. Just because so many mechs, they don't have the bells and whistles, they're not necessarily that quick. So if you've got a mech that can just kind of trudge along the battlefield, just pewing off 3 PPCs, that's super powerful. But again, I do consider this mech a little bit of a cheap mech because of its construction debt. Again, that doesn't hold it back from being in this list. It's just that it's just such a beautifully designed mech, something you wouldn't have seen necessarily during the Succession Wars, because they didn't have that kind of level of ingenuity, but back in the Star League they did. So someone obviously in a factory in the Star League who came up with the Awesome was just like, we've got all those single heat sinks that everyone thinks useless, let's just put them on a mech and make it work. And if you kind of look at the heat ratio here, because it's got 28 singles, it only actually generates this with a run. Let's say you're not firing the S laser, but you're doing the 3 PPC hits. That's 32 points of heat that you're making with 28 sinking. That means you're only generating 4 points of heat a turn. So you can just have that one freebie, full 3 shot. Obviously, PPC's great range as well, and you're not having any impact on yourself. You're not putting any, negative modifiers to your movement, or any penalties to your firing or anything like that. Really easy, obviously. If you need to cool down, you just drop off 1 PPC, and then straight away you'll sink all your heat. It's just absolutely glorious efficiency is the Awesome, and used correctly in a lance, especially in 3025, it's an absolute monster. So there we are. That's number 5 on the list. Who do we have at number 4? Oh, sorry, just another thing to say as well on the Awesome. It's a really good mech as well in 3025 because it's everywhere. In fact, I think you'd probably say it's the most common mech in like the Succession Wars. As an assault mech, obviously with a caveat as assault mechs, because you get way more like lights and medium mechs, but just in terms of like commonality of assault mechs, it will absolutely be the most common, presumably because it's so efficient and it would be so in demand by the inner sphere houses. Next up then, we have got, drumroll please, the Vindicator, the VND Mark 1R. Very much a Succession Wars mate. You can see here it's 2826, so Star League's way gone at this point. Only available in one force, and if you know anything about BattleTech, you'll know that that's the Capellans. No other force really brings the Vindicator. I say that with a huge pinch of salt, because obviously there is salvage in BattleTech, and people could presumably, like a major faction could go presumably and try to buy some black market Vindicators or anything like that. So not to say you can't put them in those forces, but generally speaking, the Vindicator is what I termed the soldier mech of the Capellans. It's a 45 tonner, and much like the Awesome, it's just extremely efficient. Difference from the Awesome though is obviously it's a 45 ton mech, so it's far lighter and it's quite a lot more manoeuvrable. So you can see it's a 464. Although for a 45 tonner, I suppose that's not the fastest or the quickest, but they sacrifice that engine speed just for kind of the really quite decent levels of armour that it has there that you can see, but also because it's just so efficient on its heat. We can look here. So it's 16 single heat sinks. I am going to be talking a lot about heat sinking as well as we're going through this, because I think in 3025 that's the key. If you are introducing yourself to BattleTech, you really want to try to keep away from those ballistic heavy mechs in 3025, because those ammo explosions are poison. Obviously there is ammo on the Vindicator, but I'm going to talk through why that's not much of a drama. So 16 points of heat, and then we do a total here. If we're doing a full-on Alpha Strike here, you can see it comes in at 16 points, and the chances are you won't be doing that. You'll either be too close to use the LRM5 or you won't be close enough to use the S laser, so you're probably going to be using between 12 and 14 points of heat on a strike. Obviously you can jump, so you can generate more heat with that, but still I think really quite a heat efficient mech. At full Alpha Strike and jump, it comes in at a +4. I think that's really acceptable, especially for a Succession Wars mech. When you're kind of looking at its weapon load out there, for me, the Vindicator is like what the Shadowhawk dreams it could be. It's got those kind of real weapons that work in synergy with each other, apart from the S laser. But I think to put on a little S laser on a mech is no harm at all. It's half a ton. If you get up close and personal, fine. You can do an extra 3 points of damage with it, which especially if you're doing rear shots, that can be really useful, which you can potentially do with the Vindicator because it can jump. But you just look at those weapons in synergy there. The top two, the PPC, the LRM5, work beautifully together. You see they've got that, operating at either as a skirmish mech or a mech that's kind of getting around on the outskirts of the battlefield, just pewing off those for those potential of it's a maximum of 15 points of damage, which again in 3025 can be pretty lethal. I really do see the Vindicator as a little bit of a hunter-killer mech for lights and mediums. Really good at that with that PPC. You can see as well, if you look at the armour, really solid levels of armour for a 45-ton mech. So you've got that 14 points on the right arm, which is where the PPC is. So if you're playing it tactically, you kind of want to keep that side away from the opposition, because you've got only the small laser on the left arm, so nobody cares if that gets blowed up. Just little things as well on the Vindicator. It has arms, so it can do it's got those. If you do need to get up close and personal and punch, it's got that 5 points of damage. I know that sounds like quite a trivial thing, but for a mech where you might have to get close and personal because you are more in maybe a skirmish role, that can be useful as well if you're playing objectives and you've got a mech that can do that jumping. And maybe a mech has to go and literally pick something up. You can do that with a Vindicator. So you've got certain things going on here that are not necessarily written into the kind of script of why a mech is really good or really bad or whatever, but just those little like panache things going on with a Vindicator that I love. It's one of those mechs. It's been designed for like an all utility role. It's just, well, I say all utility, I mean, it can't tank. You wouldn't be good at that. But it's something where, like, you can get 4 of these on a battlefield. They're really quite cheap. In fact, I suppose I should have talked about with the Awesome. The Awesome is like a nefariously cheap mech. I'm talking about whether it's C-bills or battle value. Super important as well, that in 3025, because, you know, you're usually playing, like, more limited battle values. So if you're factoring things like that in, you just need to make sure you're getting as much on the table for your money. And the Vindicator fits that criteria as well. It's not overtly like an expensive mech. Yes, it has like good levels of tech on there, 'cause it's got like the PPC, but it's not, you know, I suppose Succession Wars era, you never really get that really expensive mechs because they don't have that like lost tech and double heat sinks and things like that. You do pay extra for things like jump jets, obviously. But all in all, Vindicator is really quite a reasonable mech on that front. Next up, so number 3 on our list here is the Black Knight. This is, just to be clear though, this is actually the BL Mark 7 Mark KNT. So this is the Succession Wars variant, the 2809. It runs hotter than hell, this mech, but not a massive problem, because even though it doesn't have the heat sinks, you're not really going to be going in there with the Alpha Strike. So let's just cover this chap in as much detail as we can. So speed is completely okay, like a 4.6, actually pretty good for a 75-ton mech. Armour, I'd say that's like solid. I don't think there's anything wrong with the armour levels on here at all. Heat sinks 20. That's solid. It could be a little bit better, but 20 I think is still really solid. But where this mech just really, really excels is that it's just so powerful in its weapon loadout. And in Succession War era as well. I mean, especially if you are a little bit more liberal with heat management, which I think you need to be with the Black Knight, you need to allow it to cook a little bit and take those like gambles to roll those dice to make those extra attacks. But when you're talking, I mean, just look at that weapon loadout. 1 PPC, 2 large lasers, 4 medium lasers, and an S laser. No rear-facing weaponry, no messing around. I mean, that is a brutal weapon loadout in 3025. You obviously, though, you have to be careful how you manage that heat. You as well, you know, it's a mech that can do multiple roles. It can be that tank, so you might eventually not use your PPC very much because you're in too close proximity against the opposition. Or you can use it as like a skirmisher mech where you just drop using the M lasers and you're just using the PPC and the 2L lasers, which again, in 3025, just having the option of those 3 weapons on one mech is really, really strong. Range is fantastic as well. You can see there it comes in with those 3 big guns, all in 3025. Very, very well. It's basically as good a range as you can get outside of the LRMs. Again, up close and personal though, if you need to do it. I mean, if you Alpha Strike, yes, you are going to cook the mech, but you will also cook your opposition. So it's just one of those mechs that can be an absolute game changer. Obviously, as you know, as the technology improves in BattleTech, you do find variants of the Black Knight which do best this considerably because it'll have double heat sinks on there. But I just think, again, in 3025, this mech is just devastating. I'd go so far as to say it could have made number 1 on this list. There's a reason it didn't, which I'll talk about when we get into number 1. But if you are running a 3025 list and you're not thinking about Black Knights, then you're doing something wrong, really. Just one thing to say, though, they're not available to every faction. I don't believe the Capellans have them. Or they're certainly not on the Master Units list. I think every other major Inner Sphere faction has them. There's certainly a mech that I'd associate with the Draconis Combine, so you will find them, in In-house Karita. It kind of looks a bit like an evil mech as well. You know, it's got that kind of like helmet. It's very, very cool looking mech. One of my favourite variants with it is the one on the wall behind me there, which is the Clambuster variant, which has the big sword. Fantastic mech, beautiful mech. It's a mech that it's to me it's one of the quintessential mechs of BattleTech. It should be more famous than it probably is. It looks very cool. It's got beautiful weapons loadout. I think as well, it's not given the credit that it really deserves. I know, you know, a lot of people talk about like the Awesome, for instance, but I think you look at the Black Knights like portfolio. It's so good. It's so good. It's obviously faster than an Awesome as well. I mean, you could easily get away with having a Lance of Black Knights and raining hell upon your opponent. They're really, really, really strong mechs. Next up then, number 2, we have got the Guillotine. Now, the Guillotine is an interesting one because it's at first it's kind of a mech that you associate more with the Star League era. But when I've checked, all the Inner Sphere powers have access to them. So it's completely legitimate to be on this list. You see, it's a 28-25 mech as well. Really, really strong mech in that it's jump capable. So it's a 464, 70-tonner. Armour on these is really, really quite good for a 70-ton mech. Very, very well armoured. Got a weapons loadout that's quite frankly quite beautiful. 1 L laser, 4 M lasers, 1 SRM6. That's gorgeous. There is one reason though why this didn't hit top spot, and that's because it's got a very, very dangerous ammo problem. Obviously we had let's just go back to the Vindicator very quickly. You can see the Vindicator also has ammo, but look at where the ammo is positioned. So if you were to hit the left torso, obviously there's nothing in the 4 to 6 region here, but you have a 1 in 6 chance of popping that ammo, which I think is completely fine. Like, you know, you'd take that risk, you know, to keep the LRM. If you were ever in jeopardy with it or your ammo was getting low on that section as well, you'd just jettison the ammo. On the Guillotine though, it's a real shame because if you look at this, it's just got that horrifying like ammo stood out there with nothing else, no other components in that 4 to 6 section. So you have basically got a 50% chance on a right torso crit of popping the ammo. That's not acceptable, especially for a weapon which you can't really justify jettisoning the ammo. Like, you know, just going in, because the SRM6s are powerful, they're good crit seekers, so you just have to be really careful with the Guillotine. I still think it's a superb mech, especially 30-25 era. It's worth the risk with the ammo, but just for that reason alone, it just kind of keeps it off top spot. It's a bad design flaw, is that? Very bad design flaw. I get why they've done it, because it would just be too powerful. Otherwise, for this era, you know, for Succession Wars era, without that, this does become an insanely powerful mech. And would have absolutely got onto top spot, be very clear about that. In terms of heat management, 22 heat sinks there. That's actually really quite good as well. You know, we've got there 24 points of heat, just at a glance. So you're generating 2 points of heat, plus if you're jumping at 4, so that'd be a +6. So if you're going at a full alpha strike and a jump, you're only then going to suffer that 1 movement minus on your next turn, so that's fine, and you're not going to be doing that all the time, obviously. But again, just a beautifully efficient mech. Looks great as well. It's a very it's almost like a mech with big shoulder pads. It looks very, very fun. Especially if you're playing Free Worlds League, it's a mech I really do associate with the Free Worlds League. But again, like I said, I've checked, it is available in every house in that like Renaissance era. So you can get it in there, no problem whatsoever. There's no lost tech in there. There's no kind of crazy stuff going on that will stop you from playing it in 30-25. Finally then, top spot, and this is going to be a bit weird because it's a very, very similar mech to the Guillotine. It is the Grasshopper. For me, without question, the best mech of the Succession Wars, the GHR Mark 5H. This is a mech, as I was saying this earlier, there are certain mechs that are so good they hold into the clan invasion. This is one of those mechs. You can play this in 30-52. Will give you no drama whatsoever. Let's talk about it then, especially we're going to have to do a bit of a compare and contrast then with the Guillotine, because it's literally the same mech. It's just it swaps out an SRM6 for an LRM5. Now, how I kind of equate it in my head is that the Guillotine is the offensive version of this mech. So if you just say it's the same mech, really, the Guillotine is the offensive variant, and the Grasshopper is the defensive variant. The Grasshopper has just a couple more pips in armor. You can see that if we just kind of move between these two. I think it's on the arms of the torsos. Oh no, sorry, I'm wrong. The Guillotine has more armor on the torsos. I take that back. Probably for the best, actually, given that it's going to be getting into close combat because of that SRM6, so that does make sense. Is it on the legs that the Grasshopper's got more armour? Yes, it does have slightly more armour on the legs, so that means that you have a little bit more chance of doing a death from above safely without wrecking your legs, though still, death from above, never really a good idea. I know, again, people, this is going to be quite a controversial pick, because most people, if you said to anyone, would you rather have an SRM6 or an LRM5, I think, or even me, most people would be like, I'll have an SRM6, far better weapon. The LRM5, though, on the Grasshopper, it's a safe weapon, and because it's a more defensive-minded mech for me, and it's more skirmish-based, it also doesn't have the problem with the ammo. You can see there the ammo is listed again in the right torso, but they have put it in the midst of 6 other components, which means, as opposed to the Guillotine, which is a 1 in 6 chance of an ammo a 1 in 2 chance, 50% chance of your ammo going crit. On the Grasshopper, it's 1 in 6, which is far better. I think as well, like I actually quite like the LRM5. I know a lot of people like criticise it; they just think it's a bit of a waste of space. But I don't mind just kind of making the enemy making them acknowledge you if you're kind of trying to skirmish them. It can throw them off a little bit, especially if you're looking at getting like side hits or rear hits on them, which is quite easy to do with the Grasshopper because it is a jump capable mech. So I think it's a bit of an underloved weapon is the LRM5. And I think it's because people's mindset in BattleTech is so geared towards the offensive, you know, like getting in there and shooting and attacking. It's a much more like tactical, nuanced game than that, and the LRM5 really does reflect that tactical nuance. Not much more to say about it, really. Its weapon loadout is crazy good. It's one of those mechs where they've just stacked it full of single heat sinks, so 22 heat sinks. Comes in at 369, 12, 22 on an Alpha Strike. If you jump in as well, that'll give you 26 maximum. So again, you're generating 4 heats, and much exactly same as the Awesome, obviously without the jump. So yeah, you can do a full Alpha Strike jump and not have any consequence on heat, which is great. I love mechs. I know it's a bit of, not controversial this, but like double heat sinks are obviously everyone's preference. I actually like it if you flood out a mech with single heat sinks like this, because it just means that so many of those components, those critical spaces, are taken up by something you can afford to get destroyed. You know, like if you have mechs that are just blanking all over, it's so much easier to do those center torso hits through those the crits that find their way like doing transferring damage, which is, I won't go into here, but that can be quite horrible in BattleTech. You can't really get that here because you're always going to have something. Anything that transfers is going to kind of hit those heat sinks before they get into that valuable, precious center torso area. I've got to say, I think for the Grasshopper, I think like in terms of it is my favourite mech in that era. It's just because you don't have to deal with like major ammo drama. You know, you've got 1 point of ammo there, 1 in 6 chance, that's acceptable. Its weapon loadout for this era is really, really strong. You know, if you're in like skirmish range, if you're in that like really beautiful space, like 5 inches away, I think is perfect for Grasshopper. You're in short range then with the L lasers. You're in medium range with the M lasers, and at that point you've probably either binned your alarm ammo or you've used half of it or whatever, getting close to your enemy. And at that point, then you can see there you're doing that 28 points of potential damage, which is absolutely lethal. It's a mech you cannot ignore, and it's quick as well, so it's absolutely lethal. I know it's a mech to me. The Grasshoppers are really like another underloved mech in BattleTech. I think it looks great. It's a very very tall mech. It's quite like spindly. Almost looks a little bit comical, which is quite ironic given that it's an absolutely lethal mech. Just really interesting choice as well with the Guillotine, just how they are so interrelated. I mean, they are basically like brother-sister mechs. It's just one's more aggressive, one plays more defensively. If you can get those into your forces, do it in 3025. You won't regret it. I mean, I think like if obviously we're talking about we've got 5 mechs here as opposed to a lance, but if you could run like a Guillotine, a Black Knight, a Grasshopper, and I'd probably say Vindicator instead of the Awesome, because the Awesome's obviously like an assault mech and it's not as manoeuvrable as the others. That will give you 4 jump capable mechs that have very little ammo in there, very laser spammy, really really strong. That lance. The Awesome would be super strong in there as well, but obviously it's an assault mech. It's more expensive and it's slow, so you probably would be against the tactics that you're using across that lance. Yeah, so that's my top 5 anyway. One point of note, because there are other mechs in there that really should have been on this list, but for many reasons aren't. Again, I've kind of gone through those reasons why I didn't put, all my rules as to how this criteria was defined, but I can already hear people screaming, what about the Marauder 2? The Marauder 2 is a phenomenal, I mean, it's one of those, it's like a zombie mech, it's like almost impossible to kill. Its armor levels are insane, really, really powerful mech, but it's a wolf that's just so tied into the kind of lore of the Wolf's Dragoons that I'm sure that some Innisphere powers have access to them, but certainly not on the Master Unit list. So there are mechs in and around this area, like there's the Annihilator as well, another Wolf's Dragoon special, that you'd probably say are just absolutely brutal fielded in 3025, but they're not on this list because they're just not common. Again, there's an ambiguity to it, because is the Master Unit list like gospel? Well, not necessarily. In fact, I've been through some of those lists and thought, how have they missed out this mech when it's very obvious from the lore that it should be in there, that kind of thing. But like it, for whatever reason, they've not put it in there. But you use the MUL list as a guide, and I think having mechs like the Marauder 2 on tabletop in 3025 is like a cheat code. I certainly wouldn't do that to an opponent. I suppose you could do it in battle value terms, because it is all reflected in there. So as long as they're able to bring, the equivalent force or whatever to take off that armor, if they can do that, then great. But generally speaking, I've tried to keep this to the more generic mechs, the mechs that are either in, some of them are in every force, like the Grasshopper and the Guillotine are certainly available to every faction. Awesome as well, obviously. The Black Knight, again, don't think the Capellans get the Black Knight, and the Vindicator is a really specific mech to the Capellans, but, and if they've just released the new plastic model of that. I saw someone do a review of that the other day on YouTube. So that should be with us shortly. I will be buying probably numerous of those beginner box sets just to get the Vindicator, because I adore the Vindicator. I did a list recently on the my top 5 Innisphere mechs. It really should have been on there. But I tell you why I didn't, because I listed the Enforcer on there. The Vindicator would actually go above the Enforcer, but because we didn't have the Vindicator plastic model, I was like, and I do own some of the old metal models for the Vindicators, but I was like, I love the new Enforcer model anyway. And the Enforcer's a great mech. It's just that, I think if you're talking about bang for your buck, the Vindicator is just superb. I mean, again, it's that compelling ingenuity of knowing their resources and their limitations, but just maximising everything on it. So put a Soldier 45-ton mech on there that's really easy to pilot, really easy to maintain, put a PPC on its arm, flood the battlefield with them and win. Just great. Anyway, I think I'm going to leave that here. Hopefully you found that of interest. I never really do the whole comment below thing or whatever. If you want to do that, great, fine, fill your boots. I am interested always in other people's opinions in BattleTech. What are your favourite 3025 mechs? I'm not going to be so crass as to say, ooh, community start a discussion or something like that. I feel a bit weird saying stuff like that. But I am interested to know, if you've got a favourite mech of 3025 that just smashes the tabletop every time you play it. That would be interesting to know, because there are, like I said, there are some absolute gems in that era. I think a lot of people just assume it's just junker mechs from the Succession Wars, but just go and have a look at the bit that I just talked about on the Awesome. That completely disproves that. That, to me, the Awesome, right up until the Clan Invasion, when they actually update the Awesome and they put the ERP-PCs on there, which make it really, really strong, because you've got the double heat sinks to mitigate that extra heat, and then it doesn't have the minimum range penalties, so it turns it into an absolute monster. But again, just that, even the Succession Wars era Awesome to me is a slight cheat code of a mech, and I can well understand why it's very popular. Anyway, I am going to leave that here. Hopefully, normal scheduling for recording will now be resumed. Hopefully, no more COVID or problems. Again, apologies that I disappeared for 2 weeks. I really don't like doing it. I tried my hardest to do one video a week, kind of tried to set that in stone as much as possible. So hopefully over the summer I can get some lore chat in as well. Be interested to do some more of the weird like controversy, the weird like conspiracy theories that are in and around the BattleTech in-world universe. So might cover some of those again. Anyway, I will thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.